Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to try and break down a story that's been wrapped in mystery and conspiracy for years, the release of the Jeffrey Epstein files. What was promised as this big moment of reckoning? Well, it turned into something way more complicated. For years, the whole narrative has been driven by these whispers of a secret client list, this bombshell document that was supposed to expose a whole network of powerful men. But when the files were finally unsealed, what did we actually find? Okay, so this right here, this is the heart of the whole thing. It's this massive gap between what the public expected and what investigators actually found. The idea of a single damning client list just fueled years and years of speculation. But the hard truth, according to the FBI's own records, is that a list like that was never found. Right, so if there was no big, infamous client list, then what in the world did the investigation uncover? Let's take a look at the FBI's core findings based on the millions of pages of documents that eventually came out. Okay, let's be crystal clear about this. The internal Justice Department records, they leave zero room for doubt. Investigators found overwhelming, undeniable proof that Jeffrey Epstein personally and repeatedly abused underage girls. But, and this is a huge but, this is where the story takes a sharp turn away from that popular narrative. Those same records say there was very little evidence that he was running some big sex trafficking ring for other powerful men, or that he was engaged in some kind of sophisticated blackmail scheme. And look, the FBI wasn't beating around the bush about this internally. In a memo from February 2025, a supervising agent wrote, and I'm quoting here, "Investigators did not locate such a list during the course of the investigation." That's a really explicit statement to their bosses, directly knocking down the media narrative. And that gap between what people thought was happening and the actual physical evidence, it showed up in the photos and videos, too. Investigators seized a ton of media from his properties, but prosecutors confirmed none of it showed victims being abused or implicated anyone other than Epstein and his accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell. So that's the big question, right? If the evidence wasn't pointing to some huge conspiracy, why on earth were millions of these documents released at all? Well, the answer isn't really in the investigation itself, but in this intense political firestorm that just built up over years, fueled by public pressure and a lot of campaign promises. The pressure really started building in 2024, but things just exploded in February 2025 when the Attorney General claimed a client list was sitting on her desk. That, as you can imagine, set off a media frenzy. But then, just a few months later, the DOJ did a complete 180, saying no such list even existed. That contradiction was really the last straw for Congress, which went on to pass a bipartisan act in November, forcing all of the files to be disclosed. And wow, once that act was passed and the floodgates opened, this story went global. The shockwaves were felt in governments and powerful institutions all over the world. It led to a very swift global reckoning. And the fallout was just immediate and really severe. In the UK, you had a prominent lord resign and face a police probe. In France, a former minister was suddenly under investigation for financial crimes. And in places like Latvia and Poland, the files kicked off official inquiries into local connections. For a lot of powerful people, the consequences were fast and career-ending. But here's the tragic irony in all of this. What was supposed to be this huge moment of accountability and transparency, it just turned into an absolute catastrophe for the very people it was meant to help. The victims. Let's not mince words here. The way this was handled was a total disaster, which should have been about closure. Well, it just ended up causing renewed, terrible harm to Epstein's survivors. And you have to understand the scale we're talking about here. It was just staggering. In January 2026 alone, the DOJ just dumped over 3 million pages online. That massive amount of data completely overwhelmed any process they had for redacting sensitive information. And the result of that? Utterly catastrophic. The DOJ tried to blame technical or human error, but the bottom line is that thousands of these documents exposed the most sensitive information you can possibly imagine. Unredacted names, nude photos, private financial data, and even full social security numbers. Listen to this quote from the lawyers for over 200 of the victims. It really just says it all, doesn't it? It highlights the devastating, real-world pain of these failures. For the survivors, this wasn't some abstract data breach. It was a re-traumatizing public violation. So all of this brings us to the final and maybe the most critical question. After all the global fallout, after all the pain inflicted on the victims by the release itself, Has anyone actually been held accountable for being involved with Epstein? Well, the official answer from the Justice Department is no. Despite everything, the years of investigating, the millions of pages released, they've basically said the files just didn't contain enough new evidence to federally prosecute anyone else. So, where does that leave us? We're left with this really unsettling question, aren't we? Did this whole painful, flawed push for transparency actually bring any real justice? Or did it just end up re traumatizing victims while failing to give us the answers the world was looking for?